Yeah, just a couple of little things. Funny surname, kind of makes you a bit memorable. Surname like Scuffil, it's not trouble, you know, it's the IL kind, that's the people as opposed to the rights, you know, you may have got one or two over the years. The historian in residence, you don't get a house, to get a title, and I've been doing it for about 7 years now. We still haven't found it, so I'm absolutely delighted to work with the communities around South Central area, and by goodness, there are people around here love that history, love the heritage, and they were sharing it with you. So give it back to me, and I go and see what I can make about it. Before we begin, I want to say a big thank you to Peter for asking me back, and also to echo thanks to Ruth. Reverend Ruth has been wonderful, not just here, but also in Crumlin, so in the area that I work in. So we go back a bit, and we've always had a fantastic working relationship, and a special mention to Sean and to Ken Castle Ballyfermot. So yes, let's have a look at this one. Castle, church and graveyard might have come as a bit of a shock to people that such a thing existed. In Ballyfermot, you're all wondering where might it have been. Some of you might know. Maybe then we can join the campaign to get a proper plaque or some sort of an information board on the site so everybody can know about it. So we'll delve into the story and see what we can find out as we work through it, okay? Now, first of all, if you were to describe Ballyfermot to someone, you're going to give directions to someone. Okay, what way would you do it? So you're trying to figure out how to get people from one place to another. So there's a few ways you can look at it. Let's look at what borders Ballyfermot first of all. So you've the office, like Parkstown. You know, Parkstown, where we are tonight, Chapelizod, is just on the edge of Ballyfermot as well. Inchicore Bluebell, depends what way you're coming, when you think about it, what direction are you heading in. Drimna, believe it or not, parts of Drimna actually border very close to Ballyfermot, or actually are technically part of it. Walkinstown, because you have to go down Walkinstown, haven't you, to start going down the kind of road to get into Ballyfermot. So you can see, you can be hitting it from all sorts of directions. Then we have the special one, Clean. Really old name. Clean, Clondalkin. You know that part of town. So that's the way maybe we would look at it if we were looking at it from a border point of view. If we were to do it from a historian's point of view, I'd be looking at things like the townlands, I'd be looking at the baronies. So to clear up the barony, first of all, it's the barony of Uppercross. So somebody should be opening the Uppercross Cafe or something like that, just to claim the barony as your own. But if you're looking at the townlands, there's 4 of them, but 2 of them have a very similar name. One is Ballyfermot Lower, and the other is Ballyfermot Upper. And that suggests that there's something going on between the 2 of them. Where they meet, there must be something happening. Then the other 2 are Gallinstown, a very ancient name, Ballyfermot, and the other one Blackditch. Blackditch actually commemorating a little tributary of the Canuck River, which obviously was a bit black and ditch somewhere, but it actually gave its name to a townland, not just a road that we have today, a townland. We're going to look at parishes. This is a nod to Reverend Ruth. If we're looking at the old parishes, it would be things like in the north, Parstown. If we're looking at the east, it's St. James's first, and then later St. Michael's. So the old parish of St. James was at one time one of the biggest ones in Dublin, and all the way out from, as you know, James Gate in and around Guinness's, all the way going west, and then eventually you got the parish of St. Michael's in Inchicore. In the south, the ancient parish of Drimna. Now, clear that up. You know Bluebell Cemetery? Everybody be familiar with Bluebell Cemetery? You know that ruined church you see in Bluebell Cemetery? That's the old Drimna church, believe it or not. So that's what we mean by the ancient parish of Drimna. And then, of course, the other one, Drimna kind of morphed into Clondalkin. You know the way the boundaries changed over the years. So those 2 parishes had a really close relationship. And then the other one, northwest, beyond Colcut, the old one of Eskerville. So there, if we were describing it by parish boundaries, they'd be the ones we'd use. So there's lots of things we can pull in to a story about Ballyfermot. Physical boundaries, the stuff that we see in our landscape. Well, we know this one was the Inchicore right there in the middle, between Inchicore and Ballyfermot. So that's how you get the railway line going through Ballyfermot itself. And then the Grand Canal, another real physical point of reference. 3 locks on the Grand Canal technically belong to the Ballyfermot area. And then the easy one, postal district of Dublin 10. So it's just nice and handy, one postal district. You wouldn't believe the problems I have in other areas because they're half of Dublin 8, they're half of Dublin 12, they're kind of straddling bits and pieces. This one's nice and clear, Dublin 10. So that's different ways of describing the same place. Some of them you'd have known about, some of them you're thinking about, but generally speaking, we all agree on that. That's a really good way of describing where exactly Ballyfermot is, depending on where we come from, depending on our point of reference. To put that on a real old map, some of the oldest maps we have are the Griffiths valuation maps. These are the ones that are used to divide up Ireland and hand it out to people who are really successful in fighting wars. Not a lot of our own natives were very successful in fighting wars. We were better at rebellion. But you can see on it, it's kind of hard to see them. But take my word for it, the big oval on the bottom there, that's Gallon's Town, so it's a big townland. The one up at the top is the Black Ditch one, and the one in the middle is the Ballyfermot's upper and lower. Now when you look at it, you can see most of it is kind of farmland, farm boundaries, field boundaries. All those lines indicate a different field. And when you look at the middle one, where the 2 Ballyfermots meet, there's something going on there. There's a little hamlet on that map. There's some sort of a cluster of buildings of significance. That's what I meant when I said the 2 Ballyfermots were important. Where they meet is this hamlet that appears on all the older maps. Let's leave the old maps for a minute and use some of the technology we've got today. Let's go Google Earth and have a look and see what that looks like. And you all know it. I put in the library as a point of reference in Ballyfermot. Does everyone know the Laurence? Leffernoux Park, as it used to be called. That's what we're talking about. That's the absolute heart of Ballyfermot. That's the absolute spot where the 2 Ballyfermot townlands meet. And that's where that little hamlet that we saw on the previous map actually existed. Right there in the middle, actually to the edge of the park. So it sort of divides Ballyfermot into the 2 parts. And the park is really, really important. Now, if I was to take that and go back to the old map, let's have a look what was there in the past.
Behind the Dublin City Council Sports Ground.
The sports complex is up the top, Boyle Sports and heading for Great Cross. You know? Yeah.
Right.
So down behind the lawns.
No.
If you were heading up the old canal bridge in the back, you know the second turn, not the Kymore one. Take the next one. Go left. You pass the park. So that's the oldest part of Ballyfermot. It's where the hamlet that we showed you on the maps where, and this is what it would look like. Pull it up just to show you on the map. Look what's going on here. If you go into the detail of the map, you can see obviously there is that Ballyfermot house. Hello. So we were very original with their name of their farmhouse at the time. But it's what's going on the other side that's really significant. We have the castle. It does say here, site of the castle. Then beside it, we have a church in ruins. It wasn't having a huge success rate, but it was there. It was really important. Right beside the church, you have a graveyard. So there's a graveyard, there's a church, the site of the castle, probably the foundations of the castle, still there somewhere. And beside it, can you see the curly wall? Some people call that a pie crust wall. Because you know the ones that your grandmothers made to make a nice curly round the edge of an apple pie. that idea. Why do you think they build a wall like that? And the clue is actually on that map. If you read everything that's up there, you build a wall with curves to protect the orchard of cherry trees. Why do you think you have a cherry orchard in Ballyfermot? That's where we got the name from. Gave its name to the whole area there because there was a significant orchard connected with this castle, connected with this site, and they built a protective wall that was circular, semicircles, full way down. You can make it out there to the right of the church in the hills. Can you see the curvy wall? So there would have been fruit trees planted there, protected by the wall, and that's the roots of Cherry Orchard. We were talking about the roots of Ballyfermot, that's also the roots of the place name Cherry Orchard. So nothing's as it seems. You've got to start thinking about things, because our history lies in plain sight, and it's up to us to find out what's going on. Place names are great place to start. So this is a really significant site. To go to a book, one of my favourite books, if you're ever looking for a book that you just want to pick up and get a description of parts of Dublin around the early 1900s, this one I can't recommend it more, that there'd be a run on it in the library, but it is a really great book to pick up and look at it. Written by Michael Weston St. John Joyce. And this is his description in 1912 in his book called The Neighbourhood of Dublin. He's a great writer. And he goes all around what we know as suburbs today, but it was countryside. And here's his description. Road up the steep hill leads to the old church and graveyard of Ballyfermot, near which formerly stood a castle. Between the house and the road is a curious brick wall, built in a series of curves and stated to have at one time formed portion of the enclosure of an orchard belonging to the castle. That just proves what I said to you a minute ago. And that's where we get the name Cherry Orchard. Comes from that unusual wall that existed in Ballyfermot right beside the castle. So it all starts to make more sense. So you see the way Wesley St. Joyce described it in 1912. That's not that long ago, just over 100 years ago. And that's his description of it. And of course the steep hill is the hill out of Chapelizod, heading up to Ballyfermot. That's the hill he's talking about, and he continued around the old road to bring out Grange Cross, because the Kylemore bit is much newer. It's not part of the landscape at the time. So it's wonderful to find a description like that in a really popular book like The Neighbourhood of Dublin. Found this in the Irish Times in 2005. So it's been a lot of talk about this site for some time. And its headline was Call for an Ancient Dublin Site to be Saved. So it turns out that the council, Dublin City Council, were being urged to buy the site of the medieval castle and the graveyard of Ballyfermot because it was in danger of being destroyed to make way for a new apartment complex. So it wasn't always in the park. This came about a little later on because they did a land swap of the building. So the site of the castle ends up in the park at a later date. That's as recent as 2005. We really need to fight hard to keep our heritage and make sure it doesn't go under apartments. At least if it's under a park, we have a chance. To quote Dr. Ruth Johnson, who was still the city archaeologist when she was quoted in the Irish Times at that time, this is what she said: it was a medieval settlement complex of high status. The only, this is what she said at the time, historic monument in the entire area of Ballyfermot. So she was making a big argument for it. And the reason she said it's of high status is because you have the three things going on together. Very rare to get the three side by side. Sometimes you will get a castle, sometimes you will get a church, and most likely a graveyard beside it. But to get all three, it was was really something special. Think of Trimna for a minute. The Trimna Castle is on the Long Mile Road, but the church, as I told you a few minutes ago, is over a Bluebell, as was the old graveyard. So it's quite a distance away from the castle. Here in Ballyfermot, we're all three side by side. That's why she said it was of high status, and at the time, the only historic monument in the entire area of Ballyfermot. But anyone who's been watching the news in the last few weeks knows that this story has changed, because we had this headline. The video showing someone interfering with skeletal remains on the new site that's been discovered in St John's College, the one that's being developed at the moment. And now, Ruth Johnson's back out again in Ballyfermot, checking out yet another historical site. And of course, the whole thing about the skeletons, that came up in the context of what happened in St Nicholas in town. So these things are hugely important, a part of our heritage. And look at what Ballyfermot is beginning to reveal. It's probably the only thing that new developments actually give us a chance to find some of the old historical archaeology that's lying there waiting for us to find. So Ballyfermot is now taking on a whole new level of importance in the world of archaeology, because it has its castle church and graveyard at one side, and then with this going on at the other. So Ruth will have to revise what she said to the Irish Times. Now you have two really important sites in Ballyfermot, and probably plenty more we found as well. So keep a close eye on that one. That's a developing story. There'll be more to come about that. Now, this is what the castle looked like. The tower house. It would have been built as defensive buildings, so that's why you have these real narrow slit type windows, because there was a crowd called the Irish, particularly the Boers and the O'Tooles. They were coming down and attacking these castles on a regular basis, so you had to make sure you could at least defend them in some ways. As peace descended, people got bigger windows, so you added in a bigger window. You can see a couple of them being added in on the front of the castle there at ancient times. It's very similar to Dublin Castle, the old piece of Dublin Castle. Very, very similar. You do find others that look quite like it. Built as defensive towers around the city of Dublin to try and protect the medieval city of Dublin itself. There you can see on the map, another map that I found, a little bit more detail of the building. So it was quite big in that it had its defensive tower, but there was another structure behind it. They would put a livable house behind, at different times over the years. And again, you can still see the church marked on that and the graveyard marked on it too. So it was a very significant building in the landscape around the area. 1781, I had a look through all the various references, just not to overload you with information, but just to give you an idea of how it pops up in all the historical documents that we find. So we find that in the 1780s, there's people commenting on the mound or the rack, some sort of a big mound in the area. That was very significant. Some sort of an earthwork that would have been in the area. Now, they were fairly typical of what the Normans put up first. It was almost like they came along with porticos and put them up first, and we get around to building the castle at a later date. So they would have a big mound, so you could spot everything around the countryside, and they would put some sort of maybe a wooden structure on top of that. So that's where we get this idea of a motte and bailey. You often hear that phrase used. This is what was going on here. To the northeast of the building that later became Ballyfermot Castle, there was evidence of this mound in the landscape. So we reckon that goes back to maybe the 12th or 14th century, really the height of the Normans arriving in Ireland. So we had built this big earthen mound and put in a timber temporary castle. By 1868 we definitely have a Ballyfermot Castle. The trouble with poor Ballyfermot Castle was it started getting completely moved up name-wise. So people were calling it Ballymount. Sure, why wouldn't you? You have a mound and it was a bally something. Sure, we make a guess at the Ballymount. Of course, we all know there's a Ballymount up beyond Walkerstown. So sometimes you find the files calling it Ballyfermot, and then you look at it, and the description is 3 miles from Chapelizod. Why did you put that down and just write Ballyfermot? You know it's Ballyfermot you're talking about. Does it seem to have a bit of a problem getting the name right? And we do find 1 or 2 files where it's actually corrected. Some people aligned it and rewrote Ballyfermot beside it. Certainly by the 1600s and 15th century, the motte, the big wooden structure, was replaced by a tower masonry castle, something built of stone, something more permanent in the landscape. Probably like the picture I showed you earlier. Very similar to others we find around the Pale. And we've used the example of Dublin. We might as well throw in Ballyfermot because it has its tower up there. Anyone on the headline who's gone to Tallaght would have noticed it as you pass around Cow. And then the one in Dublin Road is another great example. That's over near the airport. So you get all these towers dotted around Dublin as defensive structures. But they're all very similar. It's almost like we had a standard that we're going to build to all these towers in the landscape. Now I mentioned the mound. So let's go back and have another look at that map and see what we can find. Did you see where I have the red circle? See the triangle in the red circle? That's called a trig mark. That's where you take a measurement of the landscape around. A trigonometric mark. You have to pick the high spot and you take your measurements around from that. There's the mound behind the castle in Ballyfermot. It was clearly marked in the map. Now we know a lot more about this map. We're spotting where Cherry Orchard came from. We're spotting where the mound would have been, which would predate the castle, would have been the first defensive structure in place. And now we have an idea of what other things might have been going on in the area. So it was a hugely significant part of Dublin, a big mound that you could see in a relatively flat landscape. A great spot for watching out the enemy coming from a distance. So would that be there today? There is a big mound in the Laurence Park, and that's what it looks like. You can kind of see the mound. You won't miss it the next time you're up there. You'll spot it and you'll say, yeah, actually, you can see it there. It's very hard to take those things out of the landscape. No matter how much you try to flatten it, you never really get rid of it. So there is a mound